How do you handle a conversation when you feel intimidated?
We've got to remember that we're asking people to completely change their worldview and think about it from our perspective. What would it take for me to completely change my worldview?
How do you have a conversation with somebody whose faith is maybe one that you haven't explored yet or maybe don't know a lot about? One of the things that I've been taught is learning how to take an everyday conversation and turn it spiritual. With this guy, been friends with him for probably a couple years now. I would love to know where this guy stands and maybe some thought processes behind his beliefs. So I just asked him. I said, hey, man.
This week on the Reach Podcast. All right, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Reach Podcast. I have got with me today a very special guest, and that is Isaac McKee. You're coming back. This is not your first time back on the podcast. You are on Search's staff in Dallas, Texas. And, man, great to have you. Seriously, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
So today we're going to talk about another conversation that you've had, really talking with somebody about faith, God, life stuff. So why don't you set up that conversation?
Absolutely, I will. This guy is a buddy of mine that I got connected with through another buddy over the past probably 2 years or so. It's one of those, with my age too, the spiritual conversations, which will kind of be towards the end of this too, kind of a good takeaway for this conversation, of initiating spiritual conversations sometimes seems awkward, seems very weird.
That's just your age group?
I feel like this is everybody, but my age group, it feels like it's a plague. Like people just, the moment the idea of spiritual things or God comes out, it just gets really like, oh, we're not old enough to talk about that stuff. So with this guy, like I said, been friends with him for probably a couple years now, and I had the opportunity just to get lunch one-on-one with him multiple times, and I knew at some point I was just honestly genuinely curious. I'm like, okay, I would love to know where this guy stands and maybe some thought processes behind his beliefs. And one of the things that I've been taught is learning how to take an everyday conversation and turn it spiritual. And I know that every time our go-to spot's Torchy's, which is really good, and he always gets the vegan option. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's some, whether that's cultural, whether that's spiritual. So I just asked him. I said, hey, man, I know you're vegan. Why? And then this unlocks a whole world of, okay, then he goes into his religion, that he's Hindu and his sect is nonviolence. So they believe in just the way you eat should mimic that as well. And this just unlocked a lot of really cool dialogue. And obviously the goal of this is to learn to share Jesus. And if I had any tips as a 23-year-old, which I really don't have many, is just to ask questions. Right, so in this, I'm just like, okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Or, hey, this is, that's really interesting. What's different with this? For us, we'd say denomination. For them, it's sect. Like, what's different from yours to my other friend, which I know a little bit about with his as well. So this kind of opened up a broad conversation about his religion, a little bit about my religion too, because he would kind of follow up the question that I would ask him and throw it back to me. But that kind of sets up the scene. So this is kind of where we're at.
Okay.
We're at Torchy's. We're talking about religion. He's kind of now sharing a little bit about his beliefs and kind of his thought processes behind that.
Yeah, and so how do you get to, like, what's going on really with what he really thinks and why? Does he just keep going? You just keep asking questions?
Yeah, so there's a moment where, and this kind of seems to always happen with me, I don't know why, where it kind of gets very just static, where it's like, okay, I'm just asking questions. He seems interested, but at the same time, it's not overly enthusiastic, where I'm like, okay, I feel like if we're talking about belief, like it should be probably something that you're really like, hey, this is, like, especially for us, we're putting really our eternity on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of got to a point where I asked a little bit more of like an internal question of, okay, I knew a little bit about Hinduism before, just with training or just personal studying. And I kind of asked this question that got a little bit more to the root of the, like, why do you believe? And just in general, not even specifically to Hinduism, but like, what's the purpose of why we believe? Because he knows I'm a Christian. We've had some conversations about that before. And he drops the line, which I think is very common I think religion just makes you a better person. And I think just whatever floats your boat, whatever pushes you to do that, great. Which is why he's fine with me believing what I believe and him believing what he believes, because he just thinks it's essentially, another way of saying it is, all these just lead to the same path. So that then opened up really the can of worms, which is really what the conversation I really want to talk about is just this idea of, first off, understanding what you believe, because I think he's a really good buddy of mine, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, like, probably hasn't studied it too much, because if you actually look into it, and I could even say this about myself in times of my faith, where it's like, I say it, but I don't really know anything behind it, right? To where it's like, the reality is all of these really can't be true, because they all say vastly different things, which we kind of got down to that conversation a little bit more.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're listening to the Reach podcast. Reach is brought to you by Search, a ministry that helps you share Jesus. If you like what you're hearing, you'll love the Reach series. The Reach series is our new self-paced video course that gives you what you need to build relationships and have conversations about Jesus in a way that fits you. It won't cost you anything, so check it out today at reachothers.org. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, so I think it's important too. This is great so far, and so I want to pick up where we're going, but also just important for everybody listening to not be intimidated when you talk to people of like really different faiths than you might be used to. So the Eastern religions,
Absolutely.
Hinduism, Buddhism, or just anything that you're like, I don't really know much about that. And a lot of us don't know much about some of those and many others, but it doesn't necessarily matter that much in a conversation with a friend, right? Because like you can do, and you are doing, just ask questions. Like, the best way to learn about what somebody who's Hindu believes is to talk and ask the person sitting right in front of you who believes that what they believe.
Yeah.
And because that's the one you're talking to. That's the only person whose beliefs really matter at that moment, whether or not they align with anything that their religion officially teaches or not. At least you know what this person believes. And the flip is also true that I've found a lot too, which is, let's say you have put some thought into studying other religions. You maybe know a little about Hinduism. Don't make the mistake of importing what you learned in a textbook to what this person sitting in front of you believes. Go, oh, I know, I've got you figured out. You believed it, list all the things. Because very often, right, it's different. And look, people do that to us. Yeah. I remember sitting, this was years ago. I don't want to get too specific, but I was sitting at a coffee with a friend. It was a election year, presidential election. And it was a friend of mine who was not a Christian, and we're just sitting there talking, and he starts kind of pointing at me like I'm doing. Yeah. And he goes, oh, you believe that, he just started listing all these, just telling me what I believe. And I'm like, I asked him, I said, how do you know that? And by the way, you're wrong about some of that. Yeah. And he's like, what? Anyway, so it started this great dialogue, but the point is we don't want to do that to other people. No. We don't want to be that.
Not at all. That's actually a great segue, because part of this conversation too is, I guess, trial and error, as in, okay, as soon as he said the idea that all religions are essentially just to make you a better person, like automatically my brain went off of, okay, now it's my time to show you logically how this is incorrect. And I even gave, I wouldn't say a pitch, but kind of a little bit more of a, oh, hey, that's a really good point, but let me show you why that's not correct, which I think there's a loving way to do it. But I laid that out. I said, hey, friend's name, I'm like, I love you, and I love your thought process. And honestly, like, that's good to feel. Like, we want everybody to be a better person. Like, that's a lot of our desire. But the problem that comes with this is these all say vastly different things. So either one can be true and all of them can be false, or all of them are false. They all can't be true. And so that was a little bit of my pitch, and I was hoping for some reason I was like, oh, he's gonna get it. It's gonna be great, and he's gonna look up and be like, oh my gosh, you're right. Really have to think about this. And he was like, oh yeah, that's good, but I still think they're all just to make you a better person. And it was just one of those moments too. And I think it's really cool that you mentioned that, because it was one of those where I probably should have just continued to ask more questions, but I almost, I'm not going to say forced my shot, but I asked and kind of gave a little bit more of a, instead of getting to know a little bit more about your religion, I kind of almost wanted him to really question it. So that's one thing that just from vulnerability in this conversation towards like, okay, that's something that like if I could go back, which we're always going to have these, first off, if you're listening to this, you will always have a moment in a conversation that afterwards you're like, oh, why did I say that? Or, man, I really messed up right there. But God is completely in control always and forever. So I had this pitch and he gave me that answer again. And then we just continued a little bit more. Like we hit a lot more religion. We hit Mormonism. We hit Christianity, and I was able to actually give some really good dialogue with, okay, hey, here's maybe the difference with maybe what you believe, because like I said, Hinduism is very, in lack for better terms, there's a lot of generalization with gods, with how many there are, what belief in those gods are. So when they view a Christian, sometimes it might just be almost a version of them. Like God might just be God of the Bible, and Jesus might just be another version of one of their gods, or whatever the case is. So it got down, really good conversation, but the ending is really kind of where I want to sit for a little bit, because we have these conversations. It's the first time we're having it. Like I said, it wasn't one of those where you just walk in and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, let's just talk about religion. It's just one of those where you're slowly kind of being like, okay, I ask this question, we start talking about it. That's kind of what I would call a little bit more of an open door, where like now we're talking about religion, so that means I can maybe actually ask questions that pertain to spiritual topics. And the ending is, it's fascinating to me, because we're having this conversation, which to me, I would like to say I enjoy having. Like, I love talking about the things that matter because they matter. And he dropped this line, and he said, hey, Isaac, I want you to know, he's like, my friends would never believe we're having this conversation. And I'm like, at first I'm like, is that bad? I was like, is that a good thing? Is it whatever? And then we talked about it a little bit more, and he just mentioned this idea where it's like, him and his guys, they don't talk about this stuff. Like they don't talk about their own religion. They don't talk about other religions. And maybe some of that was pertaining to the fact that I was a Christian and he was Hindu, and maybe culturally that looks odd, and whatever case it was. I don't know directly every single point of the statement that he made, but there's just something about that like honestly is the key of this conversation for me, of like, man, we really avoid these conversations. Like, even within his own area of life, and I love this dude to death, even with his own area of life, and people that think the same as him still don't even talk about this stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how the conversation ended. We've had a lot more conversations since, which I could probably briefly cover, but I think that line there for me was just one of those that in a world we live in today where there's so much pain, there's so much suffering, there's so many questions about life, that we still avoid these conversations. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point, man, because so many people, I think they just avoid conversations in general.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least it seems like that percentage is going up, and probably the younger you go, I mean, just, you know, this, I have young kids, like teenagers, and they don't want to talk on the phone.
No.
You know this. You talk on the phone with your friends? Really?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really.
I don't even really that much.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit, but yeah, so we're not even really talking about anything this way.
Yep.
And so when we as followers of Christ can be intentional to sit across from somebody, whatever the setting may be,
Yeah.
and just ask good questions, even if you just move the bar the ball a little farther down the road. It's so important, I think, so meaningful and helpful today because it's so rare that anybody cares enough to do that. And I was thinking too, when you're telling that story, your buddy just hearing some of the arguments about these, non-contradiction and all the religions can't be true, and so what do we do with that? And it led me to think, his response is also pretty typical. Yeah. Right? Well, hey, great point. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And sometimes we can almost laugh and go, it's kind of funny. But we do the same thing. First, absolutely. I think we got to... because you have to think, we are trying to convince people to completely change what they think about the world. And that's not an easy thing. What would it take for an atheist to convince you or me to believe what is it? If they come in and in an hour conversation, they lay out and they have the greatest argument you've ever heard of, are you going to go, you know what? Okay, I'm in. Or are you going to maybe think on it and ask more? I mean, you see what I'm getting at?
No,
it's very hard
to
get somebody to do that. So I think we have to take that into account, that like, hey, we are asked, this is a big thing, and it's going to take time and it's steps, but you never know what God's doing with even just throwing out that little bit of information, and even him maybe seeming like, hey, I don't really care about that. That's great. That's nice. But you might find out months or years from now that something was going on that really made a difference.
Yeah, and I've learned that's a good point too, because it's also so caught up in, like, you're not just taking somebody away. I'm not gonna say away, that kind of sounds wrong, but when I'm pitching Christianity and saying, hey, this is what I truly do believe is what we call truth. It's like, you're not only telling him, hey, what I think yours and your belief is wrong from an intellectual standpoint, but it's also, I'm saying your whole culture, you're like, because like it's so much more ingrained than just a belief sometimes, right? Yeah. Like for them, especially, it's cultural. Like it's what they do.
Oh yeah.
So there's a point of that's really interesting too, because I think any time, and I think I might have said this on the last podcast, any time you're going into a conversation like this and you're expecting, doesn't mean the Lord can't have something awesome on the table, which he always tends to do, but it might not always be this elaborate, hey, I pitch you this, and like I said earlier, it just clicks. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. I do believe the wrong thing. Like, there are just these baby steps. And we love saying this around here in Search, where it's like, I'm just trying to add a drop in this guy's life. And if that drop is just for me to ask a question that he really ponders on, then that's a win. Obviously, we would love to have an end goal, but the getting there is, first off, not understanding I'm not doing anything. Like, God somehow and for some reason uses me. He doesn't have to, but he does. And all I'm trying to do is just be in the process and be in this dude's life. And I was going to add this too, that this guy, and we have these around here in Search, and if you've listened to this podcast before, you've probably heard them, that this is really just an intellectual barrier. Like, this guy has no problem with Christianity. He has it could be spiritual too, but a lot of it's just intellectually just kind of doesn't touch it, right? And it's just one of those points where it's like, logically, you could use the law of non-contradiction and get super philosophical, but the reality is it's something intellectually that he hasn't really examined. And I think that word examine is important, because it's not that they're like, oh, it's necessarily wrong or it's hateful or whatever the case is. It's just, a lot of times Christianity is not rejected because it's been examined and found waiting. It's often rejected because it hasn't been examined at all, which I think is maybe just a thing that I've learned from that conversation of, this guy he's not saying, no, hey, never. It's just more so, I kind of have my thought process, and it's just not really lining up with what you're telling me right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And another reason we do this in relationship, and it's usually not just one conversation and done, right? It's something you can build on like you've done with your buddy. So thank you for sharing, Isaac. This was fun, man.
This was a blast.
Thanks for listening to the Reach Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.